Hi everyone, you're with Karine Rayson from The Crew Coach and your host of the Wellbeing Project on Yachting International Radio. Today I have a beautiful guest with me, Lia. And Lia, we've got quite a lot of, I would say, synergy in terms of the work that we do. And just reading your bio, I'm hearing keywords that I truly resonate with: ambitious, making a positive impact, purpose-driven, empowerment, all those wonderful key words that really lift us up. So I'm going to hand it over to you to share a little bit about yourself, who you serve and how you serve them, and then we'll unpack leadership and what it means.
Thank you, Karine, and what a beautiful introduction, and what a gift it is to share this conversation with yourself and your listeners. And my background, I started is in science. I did a medical science degree originally because I had always been insatiably curious about what makes things work. So I would do things like I'd want to know what's underneath the skin, basically. And then when my father died suddenly at age 19, I was determined to find a cure for heart attack, because he's in the 1 in 3 that suffer death from heart attack. And interestingly, as an aside, in 40 years, that statistic has not changed much, Karine. So we've got a lot to do in that educational space of health and well-being to stop the rot, because we know that there's so many lifestyle factors involved in our health and well-being. Yeah. So the science of human health and what makes us tick has always been core to my sense of inquiry and what I've wanted to do. What I realised early on, though, in my honours year in biochemistry, was that test tubes and laboratories were way too lonely, and that my interest level was really about the human element of what makes people tick, what makes us do what we do, and what are we here to do? What is our life's purpose? And so that took me into the world of sales, because business and health together is where I crafted my career in professional sales, in pharmaceutical, medical technology, and then into large IT systems that in diagnostics, radiology, and healthcare. So that's where I spent most of my adult career. And again, always forging that line in terms of what's going to help humans have a better, healthier life, and how do we use technology to facilitate that? And then about 5 years ago, it was time for a change, and I went and I upskilled myself in the area of coaching psychology, where I'm bringing together my love of science, healthcare, human well-being, and now facilitating leaders to be the best they can be. And in order to have the influence on themselves and their own career development, and also the development and the culture of those they serve. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where I've landed in my 60 years on the planet. Because I just turned 60 last month, would you believe? And I don't know how that happens.
It happens really, really
here we are.
But that's something else about Lia that's so inspiring. We were chatting before the interview, is Lia is in Sydney, Australia, and I see her on social media, and one thing, she's running 14 kilometers, and then she's providing online live leadership training for her followers, and she's all go, 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 and also maintains such a healthy lifestyle. And I think that's so pivotal, because in the yachting industry, we tend to neglect our own needs. And I experienced major health issues as a result of stress, burnout, and not taking care of myself. So yeah, that's a topic we could also dive into. But I think for the purpose of this, interview today, we have a curiosity, and I can hear that from you. And obviously going in science, when you're curious, I think you naturally are a keen problem solver. And that's something that I noticed within myself as a little girl. I was always asking questions and looking at human behavior and relationships and why people do what they do. And I just love it. And I love seeing people in their zone of genius, finding their purpose. But obviously it takes work to get there. And sometimes we need the support and direction of a coach to get us to where we want to be. So just listening to what you're saying and where you are now in your journey, what are you specifically focusing on in terms of who you serve and how you serve them to get them to where they want to be?
Look, it's very interesting, Karine, as you mentioned the self-care and the burnout element. And that aspect is a consistent theme I see as the weakest link, if you like, in the mid-career professionals and executives in the science and technology industry who I serve. So I work typically with women who have been in their careers for some 20 plus years, and they are highly skilled and highly accomplished problem solvers and team leaders, and yet they're not quite getting the satisfaction out of their work that they would like. They're perhaps not being valued, they're not being seen, they're not getting the taps on the shoulders, and yet and on a personal side, they are burning out because what they're trying to do isn't getting them what they would expect. And so there's that woman primarily that I serve. So the 40 plus mid-career woman really wanting that next leap, but almost finding and feeling that it's too late for her, or that the people at the top, you almost have to wait till they retire before those coveted roles at the leadership table become available, because the science and technology industry, or STEM as it's called, science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine, these environments are typically dominated by male leadership and male culture. And a lot of the issues that I experienced as a young scientist when I was doing my honours degree, that culture is still the norm. The patriarchy, the male authority figures, the command and control, or the task focus that overrules the people focus, and only your top leaders get the investment of coaching and leader development. This middle layer, your emerging leaders, is becoming like more of a focal point. But again, from a resource perspective, still I'm seeing that the money and investment by organizations is going to those people once they're in C-suite. So yes, they're already full of all their bad habits.
Yes.
and they are who they are, usually because of time they've gotten there, and because they were a certain style of person, like culturally, like hires like and promotes like. So there's a lot of old norms, Karine, that I wonder, if that's what your listeners experience too in their environments, that usually the captain is a male. Would that be right?
It is right. And it is changing. There's more awareness around diversity and inclusion, and we're trying to change that. There's an organization called She of the Sea, and they're collecting data in terms of how many females are in leadership positions. And it is a lot of it is a lack of education around leadership and the potential that women can bring in a leadership position. And it's very interesting what you say about the middle level, because what I've noticed in all my training in leadership, the leadership course I have, it's people in the middle level positions that are doing the leadership course.
Fabulous, Karine. That means you're reaching them, and it means they're hearing you and they're seeing themselves as potential. Because from my experience, a lot of the women in the middle layers, particularly in the science, if you think about the medical research arena, they're tucked away in laboratories. They're often more introverted than extroverted as well. So they're not typically people, but they also don't see themselves as leaders or potential leaders. And this is where often someone else needs to see the potential in you before you see it in yourself. And of course, as we know, that's one of the gifts we as coaches are able to be for those people, to feed that self-belief, because that is key to successful leadership, is having a strong, clear identity. And that is a piece I see is missing from a lot of women, particularly who have been in that middle rung for a long time.
Yes, yes. And I think the key for change is being self-aware. And what I noticed in my courses, it's those with the emotional intelligence are the ones that are putting their hands up and they are investing in their personal and professional development. And I think that's fantastic. And I'm so excited. But as you've just said, the people at the top, they're stuck in bad habits and they're probably lacking that insight. And it's not only impacting them, and they don't realize it is, it's impacting their entire team, and it's having a ripple effect. And that makes me sad, because those people in leadership positions, they can have a massive impact and they can really build opportunity for their team and create a positive.
Look, culture is created by the leader. You know, that the metaphor of the leader's shadow. The leader's shadow is definitely bigger and wider and darker potentially than the followers' shadows. I mean, and this is where our energy and what our internal state is like is so important, whether we're leaders or following leaders. But particularly as leaders, our energy translates into culture. Our attitudes become the norm. And this is where, you know, with all the investment, billions and billions of dollars of investment at corporate leadership level, how impactful has that been, Karine? You know, what is the ripple effect of that? And the truth is, we're not seeing enough positive ripple effect of what those leaders are embodying in the leadership and coaching they get themselves. They're not translating that to their teams. It's not flowing downstream. So there's a whole movement towards team coaching and group coaching and bringing that education and professional development to a earlier stage in people's careers. And that's certainly where I love to work as well. And I love to see their growth, like working with those mid-career leaders, say 3 years ago, and establishing what their goals were, then helping them on that development plan and developing the personal inventory and the resources to be the person that can then get that role and stand in that role and succeed in that role. Then to take them from that position to their next goal is so rewarding, and it's so enriching on so many levels that I couldn't have hoped it to be. And now my vision is bring that opportunity to more people and make it more available to more people in a more cost-effective manner. And I think this is where group coaching programs, and together with online videos and worksheets that we put together as a program, plus coaching and group coaching support and peer support, this is where we're seeing a lot more impact, and the ripple effect can only get better from there, because we're working with people at an earlier stage in their careers.
Yes. And there's 2 points that I'd like to take from that. Firstly, leadership does not discriminate. And what I'm hearing from you, that it's important to invest in people below rather than just focusing on the top or senior level. And the other thing is, it's the quality of training that makes a difference. So if they're not passing on that knowledge, then I would look at the courses that they're doing, because that's problematic. And my theory, or how can I describe it? Motivation, not too sure, but with the let's say motivation behind my course is that you need to learn, absorb the theory, apply, go out there and put into practice, and then come back to group coaching and we unpack it and process it. And what I've noticed as a result of people going through the course, they've put it into action, and the other people, the other departments have seen what they're doing, and they're like, wow, what did you do? Can I do that? Do you have notes? Can I use your templates? I want to do the same workshop that you did. So it's just, it has that ripple effect, and that comes through the quality of training that you're doing. And the training needs to be empowering, as you've said in your bio, inspiring, all those wonderful qualities, enriching qualities that really boosts you as a leader.
And I think it needs to be contextual to the environment that people are working in. And I think that's also one of the benefits of individuals from an organization coming into a group that is that has other people from other organizations in it as well. Like there's benefits in doing like a team of of different functional leaders within one organization, but there's so much benefit too, like as you say, that one leader coming and doing your program, applying the learnings, and then that person becomes the catalyst for more impactful change within their organizations. Because what you've done, Karine, is empowered them to be that, what do we call them? They're the super... They're the energy, the positive energizers. They're the ones that have clearly had courage to try something new, and they're being scaffolded by your support and the group support of what they've learned. And they've got somewhere to come and either lick their wounds and go again, or get feedback and tweak, and so they feel supported in that change process. And I wonder if that's been one of the challenges with individual CEO training or individual executive training that is just behind closed doors, and it's not geared towards what they're actually going to do differently with their teams and behaviorally in their organization. And because leadership can be a very lonely place.
Yeah.
So I hear that a lot, that often the primary role of the coach is simply to be there to have someone download to them. Now, you and I both know that downloading alone does not create change or sustainable change. It's a stepping stone as to, part of that change process, but there needs to be a awareness, a way of inciting greater awareness, and then acting on the aspect of the awareness that is causing them the most harm. And I think, and others harm potentially. And this is why it's not it can't be a cookie cutter approach. And the proof is in the pudding, as you say. If that person then has tools and courage and skills now to go and implement something different in the environment, and others are noticing and wanting to get on board with that, then clearly that's got to be a proof point of positive impact.
Yes, yes. Now, going to your, say, females in middle management, and you said that they want to feel acknowledged and heard by their leader. How can they make that happen? How can they approach their leader with regards to not feeling heard or seen?
That can be a lot bigger than one conversation. Because the reason that that's happening, it can be quite complex. And so there's an element of helping that person create a strategy to have the conversation, to ask permission of their leader, to have a frank and honest discussion. And then there's also the skill of making that ask in an empowered way and recognizing that they may not get the response they'd like. So it's a really important question, and it's something that, as we see, in study after study after study, that people don't leave their job, they leave their manager.
Yes.
Because if you don't feel you can, if you don't feel safe, and we will come into the area of psychological safety here, that is a potentially really difficult conversation to have, because that leader isn't being coached as to be expecting it or how to handle that kind of request that is a new request from that person. 100%. It's out of character for that person.
And if you if you have a fixed mindset as a leader and someone gives you that feedback and you're not used to feedback and you've got the mentality of I'm always right, it will go pear-shaped, unfortunately. So as you've mentioned,
yes, before, and that may create like more tension and more like fallout, but it will also show your client that, well, if this is a no-go zone, if it's really a no-go zone and I don't have anywhere else to go to be heard and express my need, then is this a place that I choose to stay in?
Yes.
Or now do I ask for your support as the coach to help me find something else where there is a better values match? Because clearly, and I've been in roles like that where I've tried every which way to express myself, to get my needs heard and met without losing my power, without being rude, without being demanding, without being too, all of this stuff. And if it's not to be, it's not to be. But that's why these conversations, it's so important, ideally, that you do get coaching to and practice before going in to actually go and have that conversation. And it's a big one, because from a leader's perspective as well, they've got so many different things on their plate. They may not be on their radar at all, that they're not noticing you. That and how can that be a problem? I've got bigger fish to fry. It's like, because the higher the level in the organization, the more responsibility and more complexity you are responsible for. Right? So and ideally, the leader is being coached as well, because if there's conflict and if there's, communications issues going on, this is going to impact performance and culture and the vibe and everybody's experience in the workplace potentially. These things don't go unnoticed, do they?
No. And I think that is like your most important asset in a company or business or team. It's the people. Because
Karine, we say that, but where do you see that? Which organizations actually put their money where their mouth is and that actually enact that? And because to put people first and their growth and development first it takes money to do that. Professional development, coaching, training programs, time away from the income producing work,
Yeah.
And there's only 24 hours in a day in a really tight competitive market, which tell me a market that's not global and not competitive anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The internet has created incredible changes in dynamics in world economics, in every industry. So we, as coaches and trainers, we are the ones carrying the baton for people first. Where do we see that? Which organization can you put a finger on that is actually growing financially and is putting their people first?
Google and Apple. Apple customer service. My goodness, I've spoken to the employees there, and I asked them, how long have you been working here for? 10 years. 10 years. And it's not like I wouldn't say massively stimulating job if you're in the shop, the Apple store, and selling computers, but they tell me that, they feel valued, and they've, been given all these skills and training, and they love the culture. And I think it's very short-sighted to think, oh, but the money and the time away from work. If you think how much you spend with regards to hiring and the knowledge capital that is lost and you've got to retrain, that's far more expensive.
Well, it is, but these two are also very successful tech companies, and they are global. What about your mid-sized companies, your small to medium businesses? This is a area in the market where I find that the people are not getting the investment. They're expected to be totally self-sufficient, and here's your number, go get it. And it's like, well, this is the role, sit down and do it. And I think this is where economies of scale come into play as well. And so we're looking at the difference in available resources to invest in people when you compare multinational tech companies to small to medium businesses, family-owned businesses, where the resources are so tight that people are expected to take care of themselves in their own development. And I think this is the other category of people I serve in terms of the corporate mid-career professionals who want to become entrepreneurs or consultants, and how they go about that, and the investment that takes to pivot and become self-sustaining, trading, making money from your expertise. And this is where, again, as you said before, the balance between learning the theory that's going to help us change the way we think and make meaning of things, and help us be far more self-aware. They would be the two pillars of the personal growth development aspect. And then the actual behaviours associated with better leadership. What are they? And that pertains to how we're dealing with other people. So those skills, I think, lend themselves particularly well to group coaching environments and programs where you are mixing with other like-minded mid-career people, or people wanting to make that jump from corporate into entrepreneurship. And so you don't feel like you're taking the journey alone.
Yeah. Okay, so now, because of your experience, and you are able to have insight from both perspectives, the people at the top and, let's say, people at the bottom. If you were coming into an organization and you were going diagnostic in terms of assessing where the problem areas are and what would be the right training to deliver, where would you start with that? What sort of questions would you be asking?
That's a good question, because there's always, conversational interviews are always a good place to start with some of the key employees, both at various levels within the organisation, and then having a diagnostic tool that sets a set of standards by which you can then have a data-driven approach to what you are seeing and hearing, in conversation. And that's why I do like using a diagnostic tool. And the one I use is the mental toughness framework that has been developed some 30 years ago on the concepts of what creates grit and resilience, and what is the difference that that leaders and top sports people and educators, what are the traits and the behaviors that they are doing that sets them apart and creates success compared to others. And this is the four, has come up with the four personality traits that when we have high levels of these traits, we tend to get more success as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as sports people. And those 4 C's are commitment, confidence, challenge, and control. So you get a sense of us on a scale of 0 to 10 of the degree of mental sensitivity or mental toughness your leaders and employees have in those 4 categories. And so what we find is often, Karine, is that your senior leaders tend to have fairly high levels of mental toughness in all of those 4 C's. And that's partly because that's why they're in those roles, right? So you'll see lots of 7s and 8s. And often the lower level people and the people who have a greater level of mental sensitivity, and they tend to have less personal confidence, they tend to have lower levels of those 4 C's. So we start to see a difference in our, let's call it our maturity and ability to handle stress and pressure and complexity. So then we've got a place to start to say, okay, well, how do the people at the top become more able to facilitate and enable the people who have greater mental sensitivity in their environments? And how do we help those people with greater mental sensitivity be able to not take things as personally, be able to handle criticism a little bit like water off a duck's back, right? If that's the goal, it's going to be a process of change. So we can see from a data-based approach, an evidence-based approach, where the differences in personality and ability to handle stress and pressure lie. Because in any corporate environment, business environment, we're operating at high levels of stress, just as yachties and people on boats. My goodness, that's such a consistently high level of stress and pressure that we're working under.
Yes.
So I like to use that model, and so it's a combination then of developing the skills training around the gaps that are causing the most pain. And everybody's going to have gaps. It's not just fix my people. I mean, how often do we hear that? Fix my people. And often it's those leaders that are the hardest nuts to crack, but they're but they are there because they're hard nuts to crack. So it's a real catch-22, right?
Yeah. And the way that I do it is I do assessments. I go on board, or I do it virtually. I do a employee satisfaction survey, an engagement survey, a culture survey, and a leadership survey. And then I look at all the results, and then I can start spotting the red flags, and you'll notice a pattern. And that's really, really fascinating. And then I start doing the 360-degree appraisals, and I get the team to appraise the leader, because that's obviously part of the 360-degree appraisals. And then obviously the leaders appraise themselves. And then we look at the discrepancies. Where are the gaps, and how are we going to fill them?
Yes. And I always find there's a level of intrepidation with employees that, yes, it's all anonymous and all of that, but I find that often I need to really encourage them to be honest, really honest about what their real views are, because obviously people's hip pocket and fear of losing their job will outweigh often the
Honesty.
the potential to change anything.
Mm.
And my experience is too that if a leader is not willing to shift some of their behaviours or to be part of and be all in, it's very difficult to change culture just at the people level then, if the leader is not all in as well. And I think that is the good thing about a 360 analysis, is that the leader's agreeing to it. The leader is agreeing to being assessed by the people around them.
Yes. And I think that's a good point. It's talking to their fears and giving them that reassurance. But what I noticed by doing these surveys, there needs to be somewhat and a level of emotional intelligence. And before delivering the results, I said, this is feedback, and there may not be some truth to that feedback. It's up to us to look at the evidence to support the feedback. And it's not about who said what and trying to work it out, but the age group that I'm working with, and mostly in their 20s or early 30s, it's a lot about that, about me. What do people think of me? And then who said that? And they just want to find out the answer rather than focusing on the feedback and how can I grow and what can I change? So that's my struggle.
And that's a maturity level too, isn't it? It's a maturity level and a confidence in their own identity. And this is a lot of the work that I do at all levels of the organisation, is to create our own identity in terms of what we believe, what attitudes do we have and do we want to cultivate, what are our standards of operation for ourselves, what are our expectations of operations of others, what do we expect others, how do we expect others to treat us, and to verbalise this, right? It's like you're creating your communication plan for yourself. And that can be a really scary thing. It's one thing to do it for yourself and have that conversation with yourself, but to actually share that, particularly with bosses, around how they would like to be treated or how they would like the meetings to be handled. This is a whole new level of responsibility and voice that traditionally, as employees, I was never asked how I'd like to run a meeting. I had no say in that until I was the boss, in the old days. So, but this is where I think the matrix environments where teams are coming together specifically for projects, this agile way of working, more and more contractors, more and more gig economy. I'd imagine a lot of the boating industry is very contract driven. And, COVID must have had dire impacts on all, all boating businesses, because, that's all about connection with people and live interaction. So, I feel like we're really just getting started, but I also feel encouraged. Like people say, the leadership training market is so crowded. There's so many leadership coaches. And the way I see it is that the more do-gooders there are in the world, because I see myself as a do-gooder, I see myself as a positive energy, stimulator. And I know that the more energy I can put out into the universe, it's going to have a ripple effect. It has to, that's physics, that's science. And the more of us that are doing that, the culture will change. People's perspective and education about leadership and seeing themselves as leaders and developing into leaders themselves, that is happening at more and more and at a younger age. And people in their 20s and 30s are grasping that baton faster and earlier than we used to, and that's a good thing too. Because my goodness, there's a lot of things that need to change. So we need that energy of youth.
Oh, wonderful. Lia, before I wrap up, can you share a bit about your download that you have available and how people can find it?
Yes, so glad you asked. I have done considerable research into women who are leading in the science and technology industries against a lot of systemic barriers, biases, personal and professional, and also looked into what are the success traits behind the 4 C's of mental toughness. So behind commitment, challenge, control, confidence, how do we actually get more of that? And I've developed this chart, which I have labeled the 10 success habits to break through your glass ceiling. And these are the glass ceiling aspects of our mindset. So when we look at what the top 5%ers do to become successful, what they're doing is breaking through glass ceiling after glass ceiling after glass ceiling. So there are certain success traits they have, and there are certain actions they take. And then on the flip side of that, I've also outlined what are the converse behaviors. So if we're not having high self-belief in ourselves, what does it look like when our belief in self is low? You know, when it's low, we're not taking responsibility for our actions. We're blaming and pointing the finger often more at externals than we are ready to take responsibility for ourselves. We're working in that frame of a fixed mindset, of a frame that is feeding our excuses, if you like. So I've painted out what the converse behaviors look like as well, because again, we're never always going to be in that 5% category. We're never, ever going to be 100% there. But if we can shift ourselves, if we can coach ourselves to be thinking and behaving as a 5%er in more of these attributes and in more time than not, we're going to be moving slowly but surely into those places and experiencing the role that gives us the greatest satisfaction, and our sense of well-being and personal empowerment will grow as well. So that's geared towards that. So I do have a link that we can put in the comments and add to this, that you can certainly sign up to receive that. It's free, yeah, and I'd be really keen to hear, you know, how you're using it, or, you know, what stands out as something that, you know, maybe surprising you, or just giving you that additional insight that you perhaps haven't considered before.
Perfect. And I mentioned before about your live. So if people want to watch some of the training that you deliver on Facebook or Instagram, how can people find you there?
I think Instagram is the easiest place to go, and you can find me on Lia, Lia _Zalums, ZALUMS, and I regularly do Instagram IGTV sessions on there, and yeah, I'd love you to chime in for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. And just with regards to your download, in case people are driving and listening to this, is that on your website?
It is on, I do have, it will be on my, you know where it is? It's on my Instagram bio. Oh, that's perfect. The easiest place. Yes, I've put it on my Instagram bio. Okay. So Lia, LIA _Zalums, and yeah, that's the easiest place to find it.
Wonderful. Lia, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge plus your experience. It's massively beneficial, so thank you.
Thank you, Karine. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Bye.